You have a good job, a family that loves you, bills paid on time, stable health. In theory, your life is working perfectly. But when you stop for a few seconds in the silence, you feel a strange hole in your chest, like something important is missing. But you can't say what. It's a feeling that comes out of nowhere, especially in moments when you should be feeling grateful and complete. It's a cruel paradox. The more your life seems successful on the outside, the emptier it can feel on the inside. The new car didn't bring the expected joy, just another payment in the budget. The promotion only left a bitter taste in your mouth, like you betrayed something important to get it. Other people's compliments sound like echoes in a deep well. You hear them, but they can't touch where it really matters. You achieved everything you thought you wanted, but lost something you didn't even know you had. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychiatrist, dedicated his life to understanding this mystery that torments modern man. For him, this emptiness wasn't a character flaw or lack of gratitude. It was a signal from the soul asking to be heard, an internal alarm indicating that something fundamental was being neglected. And that's exactly what we're going to explore now, diving into Jung's deepest discoveries about the human psyche. It was Monday when he received the promotion that would change his life. After 15 years of effort, endless meetings, projects that consumed entire weekends, he had finally reached his dream position. His salary would double, his status would increase, his parents would be proud, his wife would smile with that sparkle in her eyes he hadn't seen in years. Objectively, it was everything he'd always wanted, the result of a decade and a half of sacrifice and relentless dedication. But when he closed the door to his new office and sat in the leather chair that still smelled new, joy didn't come. A cold echo came where satisfaction should have been, a disturbing quietness that seemed to suck all the energy from the moment. It was like climbing a giant mountain, only to discover that the top was a lifeless desert. He looked through the panoramic window that was now his, saw the city stretching out below, and felt smaller than ever. Carl Jung studied exactly this phenomenon during decades of clinical practice. Successful, admired, financially stable people who came to his office feeling dead inside. For Jung, this happened because we were living the wrong life, not a failed life in the traditional sense, but a life that wasn't genuinely ours. He called this living only in the persona, the social mask we create to be accepted, admired, and successful in the world. The problem with empty success is that it works perfectly in the external world. You make money, receive recognition, build a solid reputation, accumulate tangible achievements that can be measured and compared. But internally, you're only feeding the superficial ego, that part of you that worries about appearances and status, completely ignoring the deep soul that seeks meaning, purpose, and authenticity. It's like building a beautiful house on the outside, but leaving the interior completely empty. From a distance, it looks perfect. People pass by on the street and admire the facade, praise the architecture, envy the owner. But when you open the door and enter, you discover rooms without furniture, walls without soul, empty echoes where there should be life. From a distance, it looks perfect. Up close, it's uninhabitable. Jung discovered that there's something called individuation, a deep psychological process where we become who we really are, not just who others want us to be or who we think we should be. It's as if each person were born with a unique seed, but most spend their entire lives trying to transform into the tree that society expects, completely losing sight of the original tree they could have become. When we live only for external achievements, for goals imposed by others or by culture, we ignore this internal calling to become unique and authentic. The soul then charges us through emptiness, as if saying in a language that transcends words, "You're building someone else's life, not yours." It's a silent but persistent protest from our deepest essence against an existence that has become mechanical and artificial. Are you really living your own life, or just playing a role that was expected of you? Did your choices really come from your heart, or were they dictated by fear of disappointing, the need for approval, social pressure to follow a predetermined script? These questions can be scary, but Jung believed they were essential for anyone who wanted to live genuinely. The persona is this psychological mask we use to appear successful, adapted, and socially acceptable. It's the carefully edited version of ourselves that we present to the world, always strong when the situation demands strength, always gentle when gentleness is expected, always controlled when control is valued, always progressing when progress is measured. It's like a character we create imperfect over the years. The problem arises when this mask works so well, is so convincing and so praised by others, that even we ourselves start to believe in it completely. We start to think we really are that perfect person we created, forgetting that there's a real, complex, and imperfect person behind the performance. It's like an actor who played the same role for so long that he forgot who he was before he started acting. On the outside, you become the man who has everything under control, responds to emails in minutes, solves complex problems with apparent ease, keeps the family organized like a well-run company, pays bills before they're due, never loses composure in public, always has an intelligent answer for any situation. Everyone sees you as an example of success, as someone who made it, who managed to crack the code of modern life. But inside, you feel like an exhausted actor who completely forgot who he was before he started performing. The persona became an invisible but inescapable prison, where you live comfortably from a material standpoint, but can no longer breathe emotionally. It's like wearing a perfect suit that gets tighter and tighter over the years, but you can't take it off because everyone expects you to continue being that impeccable person. The emptiness arises because the persona isn't fed by real vital energy, but by external approval, social recognition, and constant validation from others. The more perfect it becomes, the more praise it receives, the further you drift from who you really are beneath the mask. It's like wearing armor all day. It protects you from others' judgments, criticism, the risks of vulnerability, but it also completely isolates you from your own feelings, desires, and deepest dreams. You become a stranger to yourself, functioning automatically like a well-programmed machine, but without any real connection to your essence, to your genuine values, to what would really make your heart beat faster. And here comes a question that can change everything. What if the image you show the world is exactly what prevents you from being truly happy? Modern life has created an environment that is extremely toxic to the human soul. We wake up to the aggressive noise of the alarm clock, check our phones before even getting out of bed. Emails, notifications, news, messages that already start accelerating our minds before they have a chance to wake up naturally. We stuff ourselves into chaotic traffic listening to bad news on the radio, work 8 or 10 hours under artificial light, in offices without windows, return home mentally exhausted, and watch television until our brains finally shut down from tiredness. Where is the silence in this frantic routine? Where is the sacred space to listen to what happens inside us? Where are the moments of contemplation, reflection, simple existence without agenda, without objective, without measured productivity? When was the last time you were alone with yourself, without any electronic device, without any external distraction, just observing your own thoughts and feelings? The human soul needs silence, like lungs need clean air. It communicates through subtle symbols, delicate intuitions, feelings that arrive like whispers, insights that sprout only when the conscious mind stops making so much noise. But our hyper-connected society has developed a kind of horror of silence, as if it were synonymous with unproductivity or waste of time. We literally invented thousands of ways to distract ourselves, to fill every available second with external stimuli. Music in headphones, podcasts in the car, television at home, social media on phones, video games, streaming, constant notifications. It's as if we've developed a deep and irrational fear of finding someone home when we arrive, fear of discovering who we really are when all distractions are removed. Jung believed that the soul gradually withdraws when it's no longer heard, when there's no more space for its delicate voice amid the deafening noise of modern life. It doesn't disappear completely, but hides in the depths of the unconscious, sending only desperate smoke signals, existential emptiness, unexplainable irritability, insomnia that doesn't improve with medication, addictions that appear out of nowhere, relationships that start well but always end in the same frustrating way. They're desperate ways for the soul to say, "I'm here, listen to me, pay attention to me." But we invariably interpret these signals as technical problems, to be solved with more distractions, more occupation, more noise, more medicines, more therapies that focus only on symptoms. It's like trying to solve a communication problem by turning up the television volume. The question that remains is simple but haunting. Are you really living or just functioning like a sophisticated biological machine? Jung discovered through decades of research that there exists within each person something he called the self, a kind of essential core, a center of internal wisdom that intuitively knows who you really are and where your life should be heading. The self is completely different from the ego, which is just the conscious and superficial part of the personality, the part that worries about appearances and social comparisons. The self is infinitely wiser, deeper, more connected to the real meaning of existence, to your unique purpose in this world, to the values that really matter to you when all external pressure is removed. And this internal wisdom is constantly trying to communicate with us through dreams, intuitions, synchronicities, those strange coincidences that seem to carry a personal message. The problem is that from very early in life, we systematically learn to ignore this inner calling. We were taught to follow external rules, to seek approval from authority figures, to always do what's expected, safe and socially accepted. Gradually, we completely stopped listening to our inner voice and started living exclusively by voices that come from outside. Parents, teachers, bosses, society, media, digital influencers. The self continues calling patiently, but its voice becomes weaker and weaker, increasingly muffled by the deafening noise of external expectations. It's like having an internal wise counselor who knows all your secrets, but whom you've spent years ignoring until he almost gave up trying to help. The emptiness we feel is, in fact, a last desperate warning from the self. It's saying with all possible urgency, you're moving dangerously away from who you really are. You're building a life that has nothing to do with your essence. You're wasting your limited time on this earth, following a script that isn't yours. It's not an error in the psychological system. It's a soul protection mechanism working perfectly. Like physical pain that immediately warns us when something is wrong in the body, emotional emptiness warns us when something is fundamentally wrong with our life direction. Jung called this process the call to individuation, the urgent and necessary invitation to become unique, authentic, whole, to start living from our real center instead of just reacting to external pressures. A question that can change your life. How many times has your deepest intuition tried to speak to you and you consciously chose to silence that voice? We officially live in the age of information overload. Our brain processes more data in a single day than our ancestors processed during an entire complete lifetime. There are hundreds of WhatsApp messages, dozens of urgent emails, thousands of app notifications, infinite social media feeds that never stop updating, news that changes minute by minute, creating a constant sensation of urgency and anxiety. Our mind becomes a chaotic train station where information never stops arriving and departing, but none stays long enough to really make sense, to be processed deeply, to transform into real wisdom. It's like trying to drink water from a fire hose. Technically, it's water, but the pressure is so strong that you can't really quench your thirst. The human soul, on the other hand, desperately needs empty space to exist and flourish. It's like a delicate plant that needs fertile soil and space to grow. If you fill the pot completely with stones, there's no room left for roots to develop. When we constantly fill our minds with external stimuli, when we don't leave any free moments for our own thoughts, genuine feelings, deep reflections, we completely lose contact with our inner life. We live exclusively on the surface of existence, scrolling infinitely, consuming content non-stop, always reacting to the next stimulus, but never really diving into ourselves. It's like living only in the foam of the ocean, never discovering the incredible depths that exist further below. The result is a life that seems very busy and connected, but is actually superficial and empty. The most tragic of all is that we completely confuse movement with real life. Because we're always busy, always connected, always doing something, always available, always producing something, we think we're living intensely and meaningfully. But superficial intensity is by no means existential depth. You can be very agitated and connected on the outside and be completely dead and disconnected from yourself on the inside. It's like confusing the agitated waves on the ocean's surface with the entire ocean. There's a lot of visible movement on the surface, storms that seem dramatic and important, but the bottom remains completely still, silent, and empty. A question that can reveal a lot about your current life. Do you really know what you feel in the depths of your heart? Or do you just automatically react to what the world demands of you at each moment? There's an ancient and powerful symbol that appears in practically all human cultures. The wanderer, the pilgrim, the man who consciously abandons all the comfortable certainties of the village to seek something greater and truer on the unknown roads of the world. Jung saw in this archetype a deep and universal truth about human nature. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary to get completely lost to have any chance of truly finding yourself. The restlessness you feel, that persistent dissatisfaction you can't explain logically, might not be a problem to be solved or a disease to be cured. It might be exactly the opposite, a sacred calling for the most important journey of your life, an invitation to abandon the comfort zone that has become a prison and set out in search of your personal truth. The archetype of the wanderer doesn't walk because he has a certain destination, a detailed map, or a business plan for the journey. He walks because he knows, deep in his soul, that staying still in the same familiar place is slowly dying inside, accepting a life that works but has no soul. He carries only the absolutely essential and courageously leaves behind everything that is safe, comfortable, and predictable, but has completely lost meaning. It's completely different from the modern tourist, who travels mainly to confirm what he already knows, to photograph famous places, to collect experiences he can post on social media. The true wanderer travels to discover what he doesn't yet know, especially about himself, about his hidden capabilities, about who he really is when all social masks are removed. His road is simultaneously internal and external, geographical and psychological. In hyper-organized modern life, few have the literal courage to take on this journey physically. But the archetype of the wanderer can be lived symbolically and equally transformatively, through the courageous willingness to question truths we've always accepted without thinking, to abandon relationships and jobs that no longer make sense even if they're safe, to explore completely unknown parts of our own personality, even if it's uncomfortable. It's developing the rare courage to not know all the answers, to not have absolute certainty about the future, to not control all aspects of life, and still continue walking with faith toward the unknown. What if that persistent discomfort you feel, that restlessness you can't explain, is actually the beginning of the most important and transformative journey of your life? Jung discovered through his studies that we all have a psychological shadow, the part of personality that we systematically reject, hide from others, or deny to ourselves. These are all the aspects we consider socially unacceptable, morally questionable, or personally embarrassing. Our true anger, our secret envy, our incorrect desires, our deepest weaknesses, our most primitive fears, our impulses that don't match the image we want to project. Instead of consciously integrating these inevitable parts of the human condition, most people prefer to push them into the darkest corners of the mind, stubbornly pretending they don't exist, denying any resemblance to aspects of human nature they consider low or primitive. It's like sweeping all the dirt in the house under the carpet. Visually, the house looks cleaner, but the dirt is still there, accumulating and creating invisible problems. But the psychological shadow doesn't magically disappear just because we choose to ignore or deny it. It remains completely alive and active in the unconscious, silently influencing our most important decisions, our most intimate relationships, our most intense reactions, our most repetitive behavior patterns. It's like having a noisy tenant in the basement of the house that you stubbornly pretend isn't there. He continues making noise, messing with things, appearing at completely unexpected and inconvenient moments. The crucial difference is that this unwanted tenant is actually a legitimate and inevitable part of yourself, a part that needs to be recognized and integrated, not expelled or denied. Jung discovered that the more energy we spend rejecting our shadow, the more power it gains over us unconsciously. The existential emptiness we feel often comes exactly from what we most try to hide and deny in ourselves. When we systematically reject important parts of our personality, we lose precious vital energy. We lose the sensation of completeness. We completely lose the possibility of being whole and integrated people. It's like trying to live using only half of your body. Technically, you can survive and even function socially, but you'll never feel complete, never have access to your total strength. A question that can be revealing and transformative. What in you was condemned to oblivion and silence, but never really stopped existing and influencing your life underground? Our Western culture treats any form of emotional suffering as a technical error in the system that needs to be corrected as quickly as possible. Sadness, anxiety, existential emptiness, anguish, melancholy, all of this automatically becomes pathology that must be medicated, therapized, resolved, eliminated, as if they were viruses that invaded a computer that should function perfectly all the time. But Jung had a completely different and much more respectful view of human suffering. He saw these difficult experiences as a sophisticated language of the unconscious, a way for the soul to communicate that something important urgently needs conscious attention. For Jung, suffering wasn't an enemy to be fought, but a teacher to be listened to. It's exactly like fever in the physical body. When you develop a fever, the real problem isn't the high temperature itself. It's just the visible symptom that your organism is courageously fighting against some infection or imbalance. If you simply lower the fever with medication, without investigating and treating the underlying cause, the disease continues developing silently, sometimes becoming more serious for not having been treated at the root. Similarly, when we try to quickly lower emotional suffering using only distractions, medications, or superficial therapies, without carefully listening to its deep message, we lose a precious and perhaps unique opportunity to understand what our soul is desperately trying to communicate to us about our life, our choices, our existential direction. Emptiness, specifically, may be the most direct and urgent way for the unconscious to warn us that we're living a life without real soul, without genuine purpose, without true connection to our deepest essence. It's a sophisticated internal alarm saying with all possible clarity, you're dangerously losing yourself. You're wasting your unique existence following scripts that aren't yours. Systematically resisting this alarm, trying to silence it compulsively with constant distractions or medications that only mask the symptoms, is like deliberately turning off the smoke detector when the house is starting to catch fire. It's a strategy that might work temporarily, but usually makes the problem much bigger and more destructive in the long run. What if you completely stopped fighting the emptiness and started listening to it with the same seriousness you'd listen to a dear friend asking for help? Our ancestors lived immersed in a world rich with symbols that gave deep meaning and clear direction to human existence. There were elaborate rituals to mark all the important passages of life: birth, adolescence, marriage, parenthood, aging, death. There were powerful myths to explain the great mysteries of existence. There were sacred traditions that organically connected the simplest daily life with the most elevated transcendent. Life had a symbolic and spiritual dimension that constantly fed the soul as much as bread fed the physical body. It was a time when things had deep meaning far beyond their immediate practical function, where each daily activity was connected to a larger narrative about the meaning of human life, where people intuitively knew their place in the cosmos and their role in the great story of humanity. Scientific and rational modernity systematically swept all this away as primitive superstition, outdated belief, magical thinking that needed to be eliminated in the name of progress. We are proudly rational, scientifically oriented, practically efficient. We explain how things work in impressive technical detail. We solve practical problems with increasing efficiency. We accumulate information in quantities our ancestors never imagined possible. But what we silently lost in the process was the essential food of the human soul. We live in a hyper-technological culture that brilliantly explains how things work, but completely forgot to explain why it's worth living, what the deeper meaning of existence is, how to connect with something greater than ourselves. We have oceans of information and deserts of meaning, mountains of efficiency and deep valleys of lost transcendence. Human beings simply cannot live fully on objective facts and technical explanations alone. They desperately need narratives that give meaning to their existence, rituals that mark their personal transformations, symbols that connect the visible world with invisible but deeply felt realities. When these spiritual elements are completely missing, life becomes mechanical, functional, efficient, but completely empty of soul. It's like trying to eat exclusively vitamins in capsules. Technically, you're receiving all the nutrients necessary to survive. You can even function well from a biological standpoint, but something absolutely essential is missing. Something that can't be scientifically quantified, but makes all the difference between surviving and truly living. Jung realized that symbols aren't unnecessary ornaments or cultural decorations that can be eliminated without consequences. They're basic psychological necessities, as essential to mental health as vitamins are to physical health. They speak an ancient language that the unconscious intuitively understands, create necessary bridges between the internal and external world, offer reliable maps to navigate the inevitable mysteries of human existence. Without these elements, we become existential orphans of meaning, functioning perfectly as sophisticated biological machines, but living in a spiritual void that no external achievement can really fill. A question that can reveal a lot about the real quality of your life. What have you been doing regularly to feed your soul, to nurture your spiritual dimension? Besides simply completing practical tasks and accumulating material achievements, Jung called the process of individuation a conscious return to the self, a psychological journey back to the true and unique center of personality. It's not a nostalgic and regressive return to the past, a childish attempt to recover lost innocence. It's a sophisticated spiral movement that takes us simultaneously forward and inward, toward the future, through the courageous dive into the depths of what we really are. It's the gradual and sometimes shocking discovery that what we desperately sought in the external world, approval, security, meaning, completeness, was always available within us, but needed to be rediscovered in a completely conscious, mature, and responsible way. It's not an easy, comfortable, or quick process. It requires courage to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves and about the choices we've made. This return to center doesn't happen through willpower or self-help techniques. It happens through courageous surrender, radical acceptance, honest willingness to look without filters at absolutely everything we are, our light and our shadow, our strength and our fragility, our certainties and our deepest doubts, our successes and our most secret failures. It's a delicate process of integration where the opposites within us stop fighting a destructive internal war and begin to dance together in a new and creative harmony. The man who always prided himself on his strength finally accepts and integrates his natural sensitivity. The man who was always ashamed of his sensitivity finally accepts and integrates his legitimate strength. The aspects that always seemed contradictory begin to reveal themselves as complementary. Individuation is fundamentally different from modern narcissism because it's not about becoming special, superior, or better than others. It's about becoming genuine, authentic, true to yourself. It's courageously abandoning the perfect persona that took so much work to build and embracing the real, imperfect, contradictory, but genuinely alive person who exists beneath all social masks. It's consciously trading the artificial success of the mask for the real authenticity of the soul, even if it means being less externally admired. This process usually begins during the famous midlife crisis, when the external life project has already been successfully realized, but the internal emptiness becomes absolutely unbearable and impossible to ignore. A question that can completely change your perspective on life. What if your true center isn't a place of definitive answers and total control, but a place of deep listening and living presence. The obsessive search for perfection is one of the greatest and most destructive sources of suffering for modern man. We want to be perfect at work, never make mistakes, always exceed expectations. We want to be perfect in relationships, never disappoint anyone, always know what to say and do. We want to be perfect parents, perfect partners, perfect friends, morally irreproachable people who never fail, never doubt, never show weakness. But Jung deeply understood that perfection is the complete opposite of real life. It's stasis, rigidity, emotional death. True life is constant movement, continuous transformation, an eternally unfinished process of growth, learning, and discovery. Trying to be perfect is like trying to stop a river. Technically possible for a few moments, but fundamentally contrary to the nature of water, which needs to flow to continue being living water. Learning to love our imperfection isn't passive resignation, lazy conformism, or giving up on personal evolution. It's recognizing with humility and wisdom that we are works in perpetual construction, that our unique beauty lies precisely in being incomplete, full of possibilities not yet realized, mysteries not yet unraveled, potentials not yet explored. It's courageously accepting that emptiness is an integral part of the human condition as much as fullness, that we don't need to fix absolutely everything in ourselves to be worthy of love, respect, and happiness. It's understanding that our vulnerability isn't a defect to be hidden, but a gateway to true and deep human connections. Existential emptiness completely stops being a desperate problem when we stop trying to compulsively fill it with achievements, relationships, experiences, objects, or anything external. It can transform into a sacred space, a place of silent listening, a fertile opening for the genuinely new to sprout organically and authentically. It's like the fundamental difference between the dead silence of a cemetery and the fertile silence of a forest at dawn. The first is total absence of life. The second is full and attentive presence, filled with possibilities not yet manifested. When we inhabit our emptiness with compassionate love instead of desperate fear, when we learn to breathe consciously within it instead of compulsively fleeing, it transforms into fertile soil where something genuinely new can finally grow. True peace doesn't come from obsessive control over all aspects of life, from eliminating all problems, from resolving all existential questions. It comes from total and loving presence in life exactly as it is, imperfect, unpredictable, sometimes painful, always mysterious. It's accepting with dignity that not everything can be resolved, scientifically explained, or dominated by will, and that this doesn't diminish our dignity as human beings in any way. On the contrary, it's precisely our conscious fragility that makes us deeply human, our accepted incompleteness that keeps us alive and curious, our embraced vulnerability that allows us to truly love and be truly loved. Maybe you don't need to fix anything in yourself. Just learn to be completely whole and present with what's still missing, still hurting, still unresolved. And when you can do this wholeheartedly, when you stop for a few seconds in silence without trying to flee or fill the empty space, the strange hole in your chest will still be there. But now you'll finally know it's not a terrible defect to be urgently repaired. It's a sacred space where your soul breathes freely, where your deepest humanity reveals itself without masks, where your true life can finally begin to flourish.